So you've heard me talk about increasing the Caribbean digital footprint, and I hope you understand how important this is. I want to move now to talk about amplifying the Caribbean voice, and they're related. While we make a deeper impression in the digital sands, we must also make a louder impression in the online space. I think it was Bob Marley who once said, "Open your eyes and look within." And he asked this question, are you satisfied with the life you're living? I want to take a different turn on that question and ask, are you satisfied with how we are represented online now? Are you satisfied with how the region is using digital media to create its own unique expression online? Let's explore this issue, amplifying the Caribbean voice. I want to make a statement here, and it's a very simple statement. The Caribbean must be heard. The Caribbean must be heard. What does this mean? And why must we be heard? There are many voices in the digital media space. And I'm going to be using digital media and internet interchangeably here, where the internet is a platform for expressing and disseminating content to a global audience. So when we consider the statement, the Caribbean must be heard, we have to understand why we must be heard. And let's look at three very important issues inside of why we need to amplify the Caribbean voice. One, we offer a perspective. The Caribbean has a perspective on the world that is no less relevant than larger, better resource countries that are putting their perspectives out there. And we all know, you can go online, you see many websites, you see many organizations from developed countries that seem to be well-resourced and that offer their opinion very boldly, and most times without even considering the differences between their societies and our societies. But that's not a problem. That's their right. Our responsibility is to ensure that our perspectives are also heard, because we offer a perspective. How we see the world is very different from how somebody who does not have the same things that surround us will see the world. And that just makes sense. If you grew up in a balmy climate where the skies are always gray and the landscape is always dull, you're going to have a pretty morbid, dull perspective and outlook on your world. You're going to want to wear gray colors and soft tones. If you grew up in a society where you're surrounded by colorful expressions of life, blue skies and yellow and red and green and orange flowers and verdant green grass, then you're going to have a very different outlook on life. You expect that everything around you will be sunny and rosy, and your perspective will inform your dress, your behavior, your attitude. So, what does that mean when we say offer perspective? It means our outlook on the world is relevant because the uniqueness of what we have around us gives us a very distinct perspective. Another reason why the Caribbean must be heard is that we have a contribution to make. We have a contribution to make. Our contribution is no less valuable than other global stakeholders. The things that we can provide, and we have seen this already in sport and in literature, where the Caribbean has produced many world-beating intellectuals and athletes and entertainers that demonstrate that even though we are small in size, we have the capacity to produce at a global scale. We have a contribution to make. Why must the Caribbean be heard? Because we have priorities. And our priorities as a region are no less important because we are small or because we are economically challenged or constrained. Our priorities impact real lives. So let's go over those three again. Why must the Caribbean be heard? We offer a perspective. We have a contribution to make. And we have priorities. These things define us as a region and define us as a people. And as we consider how we make our digital footprint, as we consider how we amplify our voice, we have to know that that voice should be heard. We have a stake in the evolution of the global media landscape. I really want you to understand this. We have a stake in the evolution of the global digital media landscape. it is not just for others in other places and in other countries and in other cultures to create the online space. The internet was created for everyone, and everyone should have a stake in it. Now, if we understand that we have a stake in the digital media landscape, then we must also understand that with that stake comes a responsibility. After all, it is said, faith without deeds is useless. Inaction is not an option for us. We now have to define and promote a Caribbean agenda as a matter of survival. So I want us to look now at the issue of the internet through a local lens. And I want you to bear these phrases in mind and use them in your classes if you wish. I see, I create, I share. We want our students to see the world differently. We want them to look around and see their environment through new lenses, with a new understanding, from a different perspective. And as they look around and see the world differently, from the position of a producer as opposed to simply a consumer, we want them to create the things that are important to them where they exist. Create the things that meet needs that are relevant to the kinds of challenges that they are facing or the kinds of opportunities that they want to see. And we want them, most of all, to share it. And that's the beauty of the technology, isn't it? The internet allows us to share stuff. You know, oftentimes I think people go on looking for things and saying, if I want to find out something, I can go and use a search engine like Google or Yahoo or Bing and punch in a term and get a result. But we don't often ask ourselves, who put that result there? Who is the person who decided that the thing that I know, the knowledge that I have, should be shared? And go through the trouble and the hassle of formatting it and arranging it and customizing it and putting it in a public space for you to enjoy when you do a search. We want our students to see themselves in that position, a position of responsibility. If I know it, I can share it. If I create it, I can give it away. If I design it, I can make it accessible to others. I see my world differently. I create opportunities. I share. This simple concept, I think, will allow us to understand one of the very important philosophical underpinnings of the Cape Digital Media syllabus. And that is to create a Caribbean context within which we have access to the information most relevant to us. I want to give an example. My daughter, every year, has to do some exercise that involves a history of carnival. I think most of the Caribbean countries would have some version of a carnival, with carnival characters and different things that define carnival culture in that society. Every year, she has been trying to go online to get the answers to that question as she would for any other topic. And every year, she would find herself coming back to me and saying, but I can't find out the history of fill in the blank, the history of Calypso, the history of soca, the history of zouk, the history of the costumes, the history of the carnival characters. And she expects to find it. She expects that when she goes to a search engine and types in the name of one of these characters or one of these bands or one of these cultural icons, that there will be a whole list of resource for her. Most times, that is not the case. But if you ask her to find out the history of R&B or the history of pop or the history of classical music, she'll be on the computer for weeks on end, not being able to exhaust the available information. That has to stop. And we have an opportunity to stop it. We have an opportunity to start something new. To start a search that ends in results that never end. Results that give her insight into her history, her culture, her society. To do that, we need people seeing their world differently, creating the content for it, and sharing it with everyone. And that's why this is so important, to see the global internet through a local lens. To do this, we have to ask ourselves some key questions. I'm just going to put the questions out there. You can use these as discussion points in your classrooms. You can also use them as you debate what you're going to focus on when you amplify your own voice online. Question number 1. Digital media serves who exactly? The content that you want to create, the idea that you have, who is it intended for? You have to know this if you have to create it in the most relevant way. So serves who? Second question. Serves who? How? You have an idea for content. You have an idea to create something that involves digital media. How will it serve the person that you're thinking of? How will it satisfy the need of the audience that you're targeting? If we want to answer these questions, you know what? We can ask ourselves another question. If we want to use digital media to do new things, you can ask yourself this: what is it to you? What is digital media to you? I've asked this question several times around the region, and I'm going to put up some of the answers for you and tell me if it sounds anything like the answers you would have given if I asked you the question. For me, digital media is research. It provides news. It gives me the opportunity to play games. I can use it to build businesses. It helps me with my relationships. I use it for shopping, networking, email, education, entertainment. The list goes on and on. Digital media means something different to everyone. But digital media means the same things to all of us. It's a means for us to express what we are most interested in. And more often than not, what you're interested in is what someone else is also interested in. And that's the wonderful thing about it. You can go after something that piques your interest, post it online, and almost be guaranteed that it's going to meet the interests of thousands or even hundreds of thousands or even millions of people around the world. If you look at the world's most visited websites, you can see that in action. We normally think about Google and Yahoo and Facebook and Twitter and Wikipedia and YouTube. But you know what? When you do a survey of the most popular websites on the planet, it's a very different list. It includes sites like Gravatar and Ocook and Joomla and Trivian and Vokantete and Rakuten and all of these other websites that rank in the top 100 globally, but don't rank in the top 100 if you're just considering the Western context. And what does that say to us? Well, it says that digital media, the internet, online, ultimately provides a mechanism for anyone, anywhere in the world to share ideas and share interests and share views and share services with others. And as you move around the world, you see different expressions of what is interesting. So, Yahoo is not interesting in every country or in every region. Neither is eBay. Neither is, wait on it, Google. China has its own search engine, its own Google. It has its own Twitter, its own microblogging service. New Zealand has its own eBay. Each of these countries and each of these regions has worked out what's important to them. What should this tell us? It says that here in the Caribbean, we have just as much right as anyone else, anywhere else in the world, to share our ideas, to share our interests, to share our views, and to share our services. The World Wide Web is exactly that, a World Wide Web, a web of opportunities, a platform upon which we can take our own place. On the internet, local is global. If you focus on needs that are relevant to where you are, and you design it well, and you deliver it excellently, you will find yourself satisfying global needs. Another example I often give is a student in a class, a boy in a class who likes poetry. Let's create a fantasy scenario here. There's a young man in a class. He's a Form 3 student, boy of boys, young man of young men, but he likes poetry. And he says to himself, if I only let my classmates know that I like poetry, they're going to look at me differently. They're going to think that I'm somehow strange or funny. I can't let them know because of societal pressures or what have you. But what the internet allows that young man to do is, even if he put a poem out for his classmates and they laughed, that same poem put on the internet will get likes, pluses, loves, and all other kinds of confirming affirmation that it is wonderful, that what he has done has brought value to someone. If he only thinks about his classmates, if he only sees himself and his world in the context of that which is most immediately around him, he may never be emboldened to share. He may be never emboldened to believe that the creativity that wells up inside of him can find expression and can find affirmation. And part of what we have to do in looking at how we bring out this issue of local is global is to get past the limitation of sight of only that which is most immediate to us. So, on the internet, we have to understand that local access gives global reach. You put a local poem on the global internet, you get a global audience. We also have to understand that satisfying local needs creates global opportunities. You get that? You have local access giving global reach. And that's kind of like the consumer paradigm. I know I can go on the internet and find out all kinds of things about the world around me. I can go and find. But then we have to also understand that I can publish and share and allow someone else to find what I have shared. So you have the consumer paradigm, the producer paradigm. The question is, what kinds of factors allow content creators around our Caribbean region to take advantage of and take their place in the global digital media landscape? What kinds of factors? When we say local is the new global, what are some of the main issues that we have to understand? I'm just going to give you 4. Firstly, we have to understand the role and value of ideas and needs. Ideas and needs. The role and value of ideas and needs. We also have to understand the place that content and applications play. What kind of material, what kind of products, what kinds of innovations meet local needs, but at the same time satisfy global opportunities. Many of you may know the story of Facebook and how it started in a US university. It didn't start off as a project that was designed to get over 1 billion people around the world connected. It started off as one young man's attempt to make himself popular in his school. That's as local can get. But he designed it in a way that once it was deployed or implemented, once it was put on the internet, everyone had access to it. And he quickly realized that his local school challenge became a global phenomenon. The same thing applies to a lot of the technology that we take for granted today. YouTube, Twitter. These all came out of people trying to deal with very local, very selfish needs that they had, but designing it and developing it and implementing it on a global platform that gives you and me access as well. Now, we have needs as well here in the Caribbean. And this is the promise and potential of the digital media. If we create content and if we create applications that meet those needs, chances are that there are many, many, many people around the world who will also find it of value and of interest and of importance. So, in looking at local as the new global, we have to understand you have to have the ideas, you have to identify the needs, but you have to have the content and the applications that can meet those needs. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. I gave you an example of Facebook and YouTube. Those things took place in an environment where you have venture funding and strong infrastructure and broadband internet. We need enabling conditions here as well too. Part of what we want students to understand inside of this CAPE Digital Media syllabus is the role that they must play in creating those enabling conditions. They have to understand what does it take to create a successful digital media startup or to create successful digital media content. What are those conditions? How do I get more broadband in my school or my community or in my country? How do I get more people who have mobile phones for show to understand that they can be used productively or for entertainment to go beyond phone calls and messaging? So those are some of the challenges that we'll face in creating the environment for the digital media content. And then we have to understand the 4th point. We have to have the will to make it happen. And that's where that whole paradigm shift comes in again. We have to believe that we have a right to do this. It's all well and good to have the ideas, and I'm sure if you sat down now and brainstorm, you can come up with many ideas for what would be nice and what would be good. But ideas have to translate into action. And so ideas must meet needs, content and applications must meet those ideas, the conditions must be right for us to develop it, but we have to believe that we can do it. Local is the new global. So what are some of the forms of content that we can build out in looking at our new local internet and our local content? We can look at news, media, culture, products. We can look at organizations, businesses, schools around us and identify the kinds of things that they would benefit from if someone was developing content for them. We can also look at some of the areas that are currently underserved or not served at all. Civic services, e-government services, broadcasting, books. So much of the content that we still have on books have not been digitized. What does it take to digitize it? Who is writing the new books for the digital formats? Communications. How easy is it to share what's going on around us as a region? That's an important one because we talk about the Caribbean reality and increasing our Caribbean consciousness. Digital media, the internet, these tools allow us to see each other in entirely new ways. You don't get Dominican daily newspapers delivered to every door in Antigua, do you? But you can get it online. You can find out what's happening throughout the region. You can use the technology to remove the barriers and to reduce the walls that blind us from seeing how much we actually have in common. I think it was one of the regional entertainers who very appropriately said, much more unites us than divides us. You know, one of the biggest things that divides us is sight of each other. The technology can be used to provide that sight. That's an opportunity waiting to be seized. Technology can be used to create new platforms for delivering news, create new opportunities for artists taking photographs, graphics, creating new kinds of digital content, creating new platforms for social networking, creating new utilities that solve very real, very practical issues. A world of possibility awaits us. What's inside of this world? Inside of this world is the opportunity to create Caribbean mobile apps, podcasts, to do blogging, web design, graphic design, animation. We can create our own ebooks, have our poets and our writers producing material relevant to the world around them and satisfying needs to the wider global community. We can do digital photography. We can have broadcasts that go from a small village somewhere in some obscure rural community to an entire global audience. That's the possibility. That's the world that awaits us. I want to use another quote from another Caribbean artisan. And it's simply this: we can make it if we try. This is what we have the opportunity to do. But we have to try. We have to believe. We have to have the faith, the confidence, and the conviction that this is important. That it makes sense to do. That it's the right thing to do. That it's the responsible thing to do. But you know what? We also have to believe that this is our only option. That if we don't take the opportunity to understand the nature of the change in the world around us, there are very real risks that we're putting our children and our societies at. But it's not just a doom and gloom. There's also very real promise and potential that we have a right to seize, that we have an opportunity to embrace. We can make it if we try. We can create a digital media landscape that reflects the Caribbean ambitions and aspirations. So I want you to ask yourself this question. I want students to ask themselves as well, what kind of digital media world do you want to create? If you get some answers, I want you to rise up, to go out, and to make it happen.